All right, today we're going to take a look at the second permanent settlement, English settlement in the New World. We've already looked at Jamestown. Today we're going to take a look at Massachusetts. In particular, we're going to focus on the first two groups to come over and settle in Massachusetts, the Pilgrims and the Puritans. Let's start with the Pilgrims. It's important to understand that the Pilgrims are actually a smaller group of Puritans. So Puritans is kind of the big group, and the Pilgrims are a smaller group underneath of that. So what were the Puritans? The Puritans were a group that criticized the English church, or what was called the Anglican church, the Church of England. And they got the nickname the Puritans because they wanted to purify the church. They had a problem with some of the things that the church was doing. One big thing that they had a problem with was the fact that the church made it difficult to read and interpret the Bible for yourself. That was the job of the priests. And the Puritans disagreed with that. They didn't like all of the pomp and ceremony of the Church of England. They thought that everyone should be able to read the Bible and think about what it meant for himself or herself. The Pilgrims were a smaller group within the Puritans who wanted not just to purify the church, but to completely break away from it. So sometimes you hear the Pilgrims are also called separatists because they didn't want to just fix the Church of England, they wanted to completely break away. In 1620, a group came to Massachusetts on a ship called the Mayflower. Half the people on that ship were Pilgrims, half of them were not. When they arrived, they had some serious problems that needed to be addressed immediately. For one, a lot of them were really sick. Two, they weren't supposed to be in Massachusetts. They were supposed to be in Virginia. They didn't have permission to be in Massachusetts, so that was a problem. Another problem was because they weren't where they were supposed to be. There were some people in the group who argued that they didn't have to listen to the leaders, right? Because the permission that they got from the king was to go to Virginia. Well, they weren't in Virginia. So they said, we don't really have to listen to you anymore. And then perhaps one of the biggest problems was it was cold, right? They showed up, it was almost winter time in New England, very, very cold, and they needed shelter, food, and fuel. So they're facing some pretty major problems and they need to solve them. So to address these problems, they wrote and signed an important document called the Mayflower Compact. So what did it say? The Mayflower Compact said they could elect representatives to make decisions for the general good of the colony. It also said everyone would agree to obey just and equal laws. And this Mayflower Compact is a really, really important document because it became the first written down framework or plan for self-government in the American colonies. The first time that they wrote down, we're going to elect representatives and we're all going to agree to obey the laws. So the Pilgrims are one group. Then the next group is that larger group of Puritans. In the 10 years between 1630 and 1640, about 20,000 Puritans came over to Massachusetts. That's a large number, so that naturally leads to the question of why? Why did so many come over? Well, several reasons. For one, they were unhappy with the king. They did not like the way things were going in England. In particular, they wanted to worship their own way. They weren't happy with the Church of England. They wanted to come here for religious freedom. They also wanted to set an example for others to follow. We're going to look at a document in class where they talk about trying to be a city on a hill, right? To be a shining example for others to follow after. So they set up a government based on a charter or a license from the king. Here's how it worked. Each town was governed by the male church members. The town would choose a member of the general court, which was sort of like the House of Burgesses in Virginia, and it would write laws for the whole colony of Massachusetts. At first, the general court picked who the governor was, but then later on, any of the male church members in all of Massachusetts could vote for the governor, and the governor would serve for 1 year. Any group of settlers could apply to the general court if they wanted to set up their own town. The rules were you had to have at least 20 families and a Puritan minister. If your request was approved, you could get a large piece of land. And then the townspeople could distribute the land any way that they liked.